opening remarks. And I debated foregoing this responsibility, but came across this really kind of perfect Benjamin Franklin quote that is as follows: all mankind is divided into three classes: those that are movable, those that are immovable, and those that move. For us at the Kleinman Center, the Carnot Prize celebrates those who are courageous enough to move in the face of complexity, in the face of the deep uncertainty that defines our collective energy future. Our prize was named after Sadi Carnot, who was an officer in Napoleon's army and after Waterloo became an amateur scientist. In his 1824 essay on the motive power of fire, which was later recognized as the first scientific statement of the second law of thermodynamics, Carnot identifies the capacity for energy to work great revolutions in human affairs. And thus Carnot provides an appropriate namesake for a prize honoring those who move towards great change. And though we are starting this evening's celebration of the minister's work with you all here in India, as you'll see in this short video, this year's Carnot Prize story really does begin in Philadelphia.
The Kleinman Center is privileged to be the current stewards of a beloved space on Penn's campus, the Fisher Fine Arts Library that was built in the 1880s to be the university's first library. We reside at the center in the tower of this wonderful building, occupying the third and fourth floors, including the space I'm standing in now, the Kleinman Center's Energy Forum. While we serve schools and students across the campus at the University of Pennsylvania, our home school is the School of Design, where architecture, planning, landscape architecture, historic preservation, and fine arts are all taught and studied.
It's been a real pleasure to participate in and be involved with the Kleinman Center. It really reinforces the role of energy policy and design, and the role of design in energy policy.
The mission of the Kleinman Center is to create the conditions for policy innovation, supporting a just and efficient transition to sustainable energy. Our biggest annual event is the awarding of the Carnot Prize for distinguished contributions for energy policy. This year's Carnot Prize is going to the Honorable Piyush Goyal, India's Minister for Coal and Railways. The minister exemplifies the highest principles of the Carnot Prize when he takes on this challenge of addressing both energy poverty and energy transition towards a sustainable world. In October 2018, as we gathered to celebrate the minister's distinguished contributions, a tragedy struck back home in India, and the minister and his entourage of family and colleagues were forced to return almost immediately upon their arrival.
We made the decision to continue with our ceremony here at Penn in Minister Goyal's honor to inform our Penn community of his work and pay tribute to him even in his absence.
The minister's work provides an all too necessary teaching moment at Penn and for the United States. Nations have common but differentiated obligations in the urgent effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which derive primarily from the combustion of fossil fuels. When we put a ton of emissions in the air, it is not to solve energy poverty in the United States. In India, it is.
For Penn, for the School of Design, for the Kleinman Center, it's a great pleasure to celebrate such a leader in energy policy.
I'm from Delhi. Over the summer, I was interning with the International Energy Agency in Paris as the Kleinman Viral Fellow. We're all very excited that Mr. Piyush Goyal is now achieving, has received this award. Even while I was at IEA, Mr. Birol had so many good things to say about him, and it really goes to say that what he's done is not just famous in India, but globally, people are very aware of what he's done. On behalf of all the Penn students, Minister Goyal, we really wanted to congratulate you on receiving the Carnot Prize. We thank you for all the great work that you've done in India.
So from here in India back to Philadelphia and on to Paris as our most recent Kleinman Birol Fellow Khushbu just told you we have some really great friends at the International Energy Agency. So it is my pleasure to introduce our 2016 Carnot Prize winner, nominator of the Honorable Minister for this year's prize, and the current Executive Director of the IEA, Dr. Fatih Birol. Prior to 2015, Dr. Birol spent 20 years as a staff member at the IEA, serving most recently as the chief economist. Since becoming the executive director under his leadership, the IEA has undertaken its first comprehensive modernization program since the creation of the agency over 40 years ago. Dr. Birol has been named by Forbes magazine as one of the most influential people on the world's energy scene and was recognized by the Financial Times as Energy Personality of the Year in 2017. And though his list of accolades goes on and on, one thing not noted on his bio, but one of our favorite facts about Fatih, is that he is an enormous and rather ruthless Galatasaray football fan. So congratulations, Fatih, on your Saturday win. It is my pleasure to welcome our friend and colleague, Dr. Fatih Birol.
Mr. Minister, dear colleagues, a very good evening to all of you. It's a great honor for me to be with you here in this very important ceremony. And I am so honored to be with you, together with my colleagues from University of Pennsylvania, my dear friends who traveled here from United States. Very kind of you that you are with us today. In the world of energy, there are different prizes, different awards, but I can tell you that this is one of the most important and most prestigious awards in the world. And I am so happy that this year's award is going to go to a man I admire deeply, to Mr. Goyal. The achievements of Minister Goyal are remarkable, many of them. I will only list 3 of them and bring to your attention. First of all, when he was the Minister of Power, he rolled out India's most comprehensive power sector reforms, a major reform not only for India, but of significant importance for the world. Second, he oversaw the world's biggest and most successful LED lighting program. It's a great, great achievement. I give this achievement wherever I go around the world as an example that energy efficiency is a very important policy tool, and it is not only words, not only analysis, not only slides, it can be done, and Minister Goyal did it. So this is very important. And third, we are seeing in India a huge expansion of renewable energies, a big program. Solar, wind growing very strongly, and again, Minister Goyal was at the helm of it, pushing the very strong renewable energy program. Now, he is very busy to modernize the railways system of India, among other preoccupations he has nowadays, I see. His records speak for itself. There is one among all these achievements I wanted to mention. I don't know what you think. All 3 are so huge achievements, but I pick up this one because it is closest to my heart. It may not be the most important for you, but it is the most important to me. It is the issue of energy access, electricity access. Under Minister Goyal's watch, India's rate of electrification rate went exponential, very, very strong. And I can tell you, which is not in my script, but I can tell you one small anecdote. In the year 2018, January, I was invited in Davos to give a speech, a dinner speech. To be honest with you, if you forgive me, Mr. Minister, and perhaps some other colleagues who were at that dinner, I don't remember the topic of my speech. But during this speech, when I was looking at the audience, I spotted Minister Goyal eating his dinner there. And whatever my speech was, I paused. And at the dinner, think about perhaps 100 people, many heads of states. I remember the Prime Minister of Denmark, for example, there. Many ministers, CEOs of major energy companies around the world. I stopped, I said, ladies and gentlemen, I just noticed Minister Goyal is with us here at this dinner. I wanted to tell you that Minister Goyal is doing a heroic work, bringing power to thousands and millions of people in India. And I was a bit emotional, as you can remember, Mr. Minister. I went on and perhaps a bit the longest speech, but at the end of my speech, including myself, all the heads of states, ministers, CEOs went up, and Minister Goyal received minutes and minutes of standing ovation from all the leaders. So I went out of my script now, as I did in my speech in Davos, but I think the great achievements of Minister Goyal well deserved it. Also, I was very happy last April when Prime Minister Modi announced that every village in India had access to electricity, and people know, wherever I go, I call this as one of the biggest achievements in the history of energy of the world, to bring power in such a short period of time to so many people. This is a great, great, great achievement, and I think we just need to assume, bring it in front of our eyes, what kind of happiness it brings hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people around the world. I know, and Minister Goyal always acknowledges this huge achievement of India is not only the work of Minister Goyal. He had a very strong team supporting his great efforts, but I know that he was the chief in command many, many years to push this agenda forward. So I think I mentioned several achievements of Minister Goyal for deserving this very prestigious award, but only one of them, the one that I have highlighted, would be enough to, in my view, I guess, and it was the view of the jury unanimously to present this award to Minister Goyal. So, before finishing my words, two final remarks. First, Minister Goyal is also a very generous man. We all know that this award, in addition to being a very prestigious award, that the people would leave their children, grandchildren, the prestige of it, it brings some financial aspect as well. And Minister Goyal was kind enough, generous enough, I understood, to donate this money to International Solar Alliance so that people in Africa can also benefit from them. My second and the last remark is, Mr. Minister, as my colleagues from Climate Center mentioned, I was also honored to have this award 2016. But I feel much more honored now that you also get this award. Thank you very much, sir. It is very good to be with you. And it is a well-deserved recognition for India's energy ambitions and for Minister Goyal. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perol, for those very, very kind words. Thank you, Professor Mark Allen Hughes, for indulging. And I would say more than indulgence, for tolerating the fact that I literally reached the Kleinman Center and had to come back without attending the programs that you had organized through the day that day. And I'm grateful to you, to Ms. Lindsay, to Molly, to Corey, to Bill, the entire team, and to you, ma'am, for really encouraging the efforts that India has done in the sphere of energy policy by flying down to India and continuing with the celebrations of the Carnot Prize. Thank you very much for bestowing this honor on me. I'm really, really grateful to the Kleinman Center. I'm grateful to you, Dr. Birol, for nominating me. And I'm extremely grateful to all of you distinguished ladies and gentlemen who have joined us on this occasion today. If one was to look at the history behind the story of electricity, of power, energy access, the fight against climate change, energy efficiency, I would say it has been inspired by the foresight of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation. Mahatma Gandhi had visualized that India lives in its villages. And unless we take development, unless we take the fruits of development to those villages, we can never truly have a happy nation, have a nation of progress. And Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has consistently over the last 5 years encouraged all his colleagues to focus on the last man at the bottom of the pyramid when it came to conducting the affairs of our ministries, of affairs of the government. And I think it is his visionary leadership and the effort of so many of my colleagues who are in this room today, secretaries who've been with me in this journey over the last 4 years, particularly in the energy space, secretaries who have worked for renewable energy to promote renewable energy, officials from different ministries, whether it is power, coal, new and renewable energy, environment, I dare say finance also. Can't do any of these things without finance. And the millions of people engaged in the power sector across the country, engaged in the mining sector across the country, the youth of India who recognize the value of clean energy. But for this collective efforts of all of my team and the leadership that Prime Minister Modi gave, I suspect this would not have been possible. And I truly dedicate this award to all of you in this journey, which has taken us from an energy shortage to a power surplus country, this journey where we have led the world in its effort to introduce energy efficiency, particularly through the LED program, in this journey to provide energy access to every single household in this country in a short span of time. In this journey to keep energy costs affordable for the poor of India, for the middle classes. In this journey to see that India provides leadership to the world's efforts to tackle the menace of carbon, the fight against emissions, the huge contribution that India is doing in the sphere of climate change is truly testament to the faith that our people have in the environment, the faith that is a part of our tradition, a part of our heritage, a part of our culture, which tells us that every element of nature has a role to play and we have to respect every element of nature. I'd like to thank the Climate Center for recognizing this work, because I think this recognition will only encourage more of our colleagues, more of our team, and will certainly give the people of India confidence that we are on the right path, the path of climate justice. Because truly, one cannot have a nation where we still had, probably at one point of time, barely 5 years ago, more than 250 million citizens of India without access to energy. We can't have villages 7 decades after independence deprived of a basic amenity of like power. We can't have children not connected to the rest of the world for lack of energy access. And I think this journey of the last 4 or 5 years, particularly the fact that very early on in this journey, I learned a lot of lessons. I don't know whether it was Sunil from Financial Express or somebody had carried a headline on me just after I'd become the power minister, probably 3rd or 4th day after I became a power minister. And there was a huge thunderstorm in Delhi, which some of you may recall, 29th or 30th of May 2014. And most of the national capital was without power. I remember the headline read, "Baptism by Outage." And that was the story of power in the country. I suspect many of the distinguished friends who have joined us today will recall that none of our homes would have been complete without either a generating set, electricity gen set, inverters for our computers, or some sort of energy backup. And the nation has progressed from that period of energy shortages to a period where we are grappling with surplus power. And we have a power secretary, Mr. Bhalla, sitting here, who's most concerned, how can we sell more power? And in some sense, sometimes I reflect on that journey and I wonder whether I have myself to blame for this problem. Because but for the energy efficiency program which we rolled out in such a big way, possibly another 20, 30 of his power plants would have been running very well now. But at what cost to the nation? At what cost to the people of India? And I dare say the LED program, and thank you very much, Dr. Birol, for espousing this cause across the world. I've had occasion where power ministers of different countries, particularly in Europe, have thanked Prime Minister Modi in our bilateral meetings for making LED affordable across the world. And I think the huge scale-up of LED bulbs in the country, of street lights across the country, helped bring down the prices by nearly 87% in India. And that made this program probably one of the most economically viable projects that I have ever seen or heard about in my own 3 decades of business experience. I was mentioning in an earlier program this morning, the entire spend of the people of India to buy these LED bulbs and change over would probably be in the region of about $2 billion at best. I suspect it should be much lower. But that $2 billion is saving the consumers and all of you, ladies and gentlemen, at least $7 billion annually in electricity bills. $7 billion. I wouldn't even get into the illumination being much more, into the life of the LED bulb being much longer and all of those other benefits. But a small thing like an LED bulb can transform the energy security and the energy scenario of a country was for me also quite a learning experience. I recall that day on 5th of January 2015 when Prime Minister Modi launched this program by changing the bulb himself in the Prime Minister's office in South Block. And frankly, all of us were full of disbelief. The bulbs those days were costing us almost 500-600 rupees in the marketplace. We set out on a mission to make available 770 million LED bulbs in a span of 5 years. That was our original target. It was a daunting task. And I remember, if I may take a small story, just to share where the inflection point of this program came in. I'd actually gone to meet the Honorable Prime Minister to report about the coal auctions. We were having auction of coal mines, which this government had perforce had to do in a very short span of time after a huge corruption scandal had resulted in almost 204 coal mines being cancelled, and the Honorable Supreme Court giving us very little time, barely 6 months, to create a new law, a new framework, establish rules of an auction, and actually auction the operating mines within 6 months. I would say it has never happened before, but we did manage to achieve that target. Within 6 months, we were able to auction all the mines in the country which were operating at that point of time. So I'd just gone to discuss with the Honorable Prime Minister the progress of the auction. And I shared with him that this is my timetable going forward, and broadly I said in 90 days I should be able to auction these mines. casually asked me, why should it take you 90 days? I gave him a big spin about the levels of control and integrity and the process and the fine-tuning of the process and absolute transparency. In fact, I even ventured to suggest to him, sir, even if you want me to help somebody, I will not be able to help. And after we had finished the review of the coal mine auction, just as I was about to leave his home, early morning, he says, how many bulbs have you sold so far? I don't know. I thought selling LED bulbs was not the power minister's prime responsibility in any case. I said, sir, I'll check up and get back to you. I said, sit down. I thought I was a management student, 30 years in industry. I knew all the good principles of running corporations. He said, Piyush, programs like this don't achieve success unless you monitor it regularly. And only when you monitor it, you'll be able to hold people accountable. And I remember coming back to office that day, some of my colleagues of that time are in this room. We prepared a mobile app in 7 days. Through that mobile app, we had the entire LED program available to the people of India on their mobiles. Every aspect of that project, of that program, is on that mobile. Over a period, it of course was refined several times, to the extent that right now, if somebody was to open that app, the Ujala app, we'll be able to find out in every district of the country how many LED bulbs have been sold until 1 minute ago. This, of course, relates to the government company which had promoted this, the EESL. I don't know if Saurabh has come here today. There, we have the managing director of EESL, Saurabh, the prime mover of this very successful program. You can go into that district and find out every location where these bulbs would be available. And should you want to go and actually buy the bulb, it connects you to the Google map, and from wherever you are, it'll show you the way to get to that outlet where the LED bulb would be available. And I think this kind of monitoring, not even on a daily basis or weekly basis, but on a minute-by-minute basis, is the kind of work that Prime Minister Modi has demonstrated over the last 5 years. Focused attention, focus on targets, focus on achievement, focus on timelines, focus on outcomes, focus on integrity. That has helped us make sure that every citizen in this country today has energy access, affordable energy access. And just like my late father had to study under streetlights to do his engineering, I believe no other child in this country should ever have to go through that ignominy. In fact, if I may share a tryst with Wharton that I have had, I was very worried the whole day today about what could go wrong possibly. Way back in 1989, that's exactly 30 years ago, Professor Harbir Singh at Wharton and I had a conversation on the phone, and then he admitted me to the PhD program in strategy at the Wharton Business School. I went through some business problems in my factory, could not go that year, took a gap year, and then one thing led to another. I never landed up studying at Wharton. The story about Dasara, the day we celebrate a very important Indian festival, is when you decided that you will award me the Carnot Prize. And when I reached there and the unfortunate tragedy back home made me rush back and I could not accept the award. When my office said Dr. Belur has suggested that when he's here in India we should do the formal award function, I was extremely concerned. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie Hum Tum. It's a Bollywood film in which every time the hero and heroine get together, some calamity has to happen. This day will pass well. So will tomorrow and day after tomorrow. I think India today is moving into the new age where we will now provide leadership on the energy sphere in different ways. In my own Ministry of Railways, we have embarked on the world's most ambitious railway electrification program, where over the next 4 or 5 years, the entire Indian railways will be 100% running on electric taxi. The only other comparable railway, which is probably much, much smaller, it would be maybe 1/5 or 1/6 the size of the Indian railways, is the Swiss railway, which is electrified. No other large railway. In fact, I'm given to understand the American railway system has barely 2% electrification. But Prime Minister Modi directed me long back, and I think again some of my officers were in the room when the call came. I was power minister at that time. I was still even handling railways. And I got a call sometime in 2015 or so, when he conceptualized that we must convert all railway lines, all railway track to electric traction. Since then, this government has made rapid strides. I think 5 years ago, the railways used to electrify about 600 odd kilometers every year. The last year we did 4,000 plus kilometers. This year we should do about 6,000. And many of us in Delhi are very concerned about pollution. You'd be amazed that 60% of the trains that come into Delhi per force have to come in on diesel, because somewhere along the route the electrification has not been done. That was the kind of planning that we've seen over so many years. The first thing we did was to fix the routes which were partially electrified. For the life of me, I cannot understand why anybody would have, as it was done in the past, electrified portions of the route. Just beats me. I can't figure it out till now. Similarly, a simple thing like LED, the changeover to LED, was never thought of by government institutions. I think the railways managed to convert the entire rail network in probably less than 1 year. We have now conceptualized, to support the clean energy program, how the railways can set up solar installations in the large tracts of land that we have across the country, which will help generate electricity at affordable prices for the railways and further bring down the carbon emissions. And I'm sharing all this only to show the holistic manner in which India is contributing to the global effort to fight against climate change, to ensure a better future for the children of India, for the youth of India, for the generations ahead of us. And in the true spirit of intergenerational equity, I think it is incumbent on all of us in this generation to make sure that we leave behind a better world to live in. We leave behind us a world where we don't have to grapple with the kind of problems that our children today, particularly in the villages, have to face. And basic amenities are taken care of. And that has been, I think, the effort of this government, all of my colleagues here, my ministerial colleagues, Prime Minister Modi, working as one organic entity, as one team, to empower the people of India. And as we had targeted in the first year when I was Power Minister, towards the common goal, from darkness, lead us to light. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. A big thank you to you, Dr. Birol, for coming all the way. A big thank you to you, Mark, and your colleagues. A big thank you to all my colleagues who have worked with me in this journey over the years. And thank you very much to all my friends, well-wishers, for making it possible to be with me today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those incredible acceptance comments that were very, very moving. I'm now delighted to introduce my boss and my friend, Dr. Mark Hughes. Mark is what we call at Penn the truest form of a lifer. He received his PhD in a year that I have been sworn not to mention, from our regional sciences department. And though he has taken leave many times, first to Princeton University, where I believe he remains the youngest faculty member ever appointed in the Woodrow Wilson School, to the Ford Foundation, to Brookings Institute, and most recently into city government, Mark always returns home to Penn. 5 years ago, he conceived and became the founding director of the Kleinman Center for Energy Policy. And though his modesty would never allow him to admit, everyone at the Kleinman Center knows that all of our opportunity to do good is owed to Mark. What his bio doesn't say, yes, thank you, yeah. What his bio doesn't say, but what everyone who has had the great privilege, and I really do mean privilege, to work with Mark will confirm, he is a brilliant thinker, a genuinely unmatched teacher, and a fantastic boss and colleague. He also asks the best questions, so I guarantee you'll enjoy this next part of the programming, a moderated conversation between Mark and our Carnot Prize winners. But I think he's going to come up here and say just one word first.
I was going to moderate. In fact, I'll probably return to my seat, but after that far too generous introduction, I had to come up and say thank you to you. I'm going to exercise my moderator's prerogative in two ways. First, I want to add to the praise because it could probably be an infinite amount of praise bestowed upon this year's winner of the Carnot Prize. So I just want to add a couple of things to that. And secondly, I fear that if we stay too long in this room on this program, that the minister will probably receive another portfolio. So what I'd like to do is say a couple more things that I've heard really just from today, and then ask each of our panelists only one question, and let them talk for a while around that question. So first, I'd like to thank again everyone in this room. It's an extraordinary collection of colleagues and leaders, thought leaders and political leaders in this crucial space. Energy policy is climate policy, Energy policy is economic policy. Energy policy is justice policy. And the Honorable Minister exemplifies that portfolio of impact in all that he does. I also want to thank Mrs. Goyal for being here and in Philadelphia. Extraordinarily generous of your own time and energies on this. And Minister, please, you have, throughout the day, very graciously, so characteristically, begged our indulgence, said thank you for our tolerance of the unfortunate events of October. Let me say two things about that. First, that day and the way you and your team dealt with that tragedy was, frankly, a masterclass for all of us around you on political leadership. And secondly, and I think Fatih will take no offense at this, I think it probably takes two ceremonies to honor all that you have done. So we welcome the opportunity for that. I also just want to, and you were so, again, gracious to thank the Penn team. Let me also take a second to thank Anuj especially, and Bruce from IEA, and Vijay from the Ministry of Tourism, whom we met just today, who has helped us so much. These events are so complex, and they themselves demand so much international cooperation in this case, and we have been so graciously hosted for this event. I'd also like to add to the list of people who have helped us from Penn is Tisha. I saw you someplace, Tisha. You were there. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a great Penn story that we have someone on the ground here that can help us with these events, and so thank you so much for all of that. Now, I'm a student, right? I can only teach because I'm a student. And I have observed at least three things just today from the minister that I'd like to note. First was that leadership. I have two more to go. Secondly, in earlier remarks today, the minister, very movingly, at a prior program, the IEA program, which was itself brilliant and fantastic under Dr. Birol's leadership, the minister told a story about Mahatma Gandhi and conveyed one of his aphorisms, very salient to the point he was making, in which he said that, talked about the power of love eventually overcoming the love of power. And I think actually there is a Goyal corollary to that aphorism, which plays on the dual meanings of the word. I think your work, Honorable Minister, shows us that power is power. The way you have brought power to so many hundreds of thousands really is, I think, a permanent corollary to that aphorism of the Mahatmas. And secondly, in earlier remarks today, you said, you summarized Dr. Birol and the IEA report on these lines, and I think it's a perfect motto for the Carnot Prize, actually. You said that the report, and I would say your career, is about recognizing realities while raising ambitions. And that tension between recognizing realities while still having the courage, which was our kind of motto for you in this year's prize, courage in the face of complexity, being able to balance that tension is an essential leadership quality in today's world and on this topic. Now, it's a measure of the progress over the last 5 years, which the minister and many of you were electrifying all of India's villages in 5 years. We've just stood up a research center at the University of Pennsylvania for the last 5 years. But it's a measure of our own progress in that these two men are both recipients of our highest honor, the Carnot Prize. It's also a measure of these two men that both of them donated the cash portion of the prize to very worthy social causes. And so I want to ask each of them one question that I think we can all benefit from, hearing their answers and discussion perhaps back and forth with each other on. There's a very popular musical on Broadway right now called Hamilton in New York. Right? It tells the story of Alexander Hamilton, one of our founding fathers, and highlights something that probably almost no Americans know about Hamilton, which was that he was an immigrant to the country, right? But under the Constitution, he would have never been allowed to become president, right, because of a provision of the Constitution that requires that you be born in the country. But he was an immigrant, and it celebrates much of this. And there's, well, much to say about that. But there is a song in this musical that is called In the Room Where It Happens. And they go on and on about the importance, especially these ambitious young men who want to change and improve the world. They want to be in the room where it happens. And both of you are always in the rooms where it happens. And I have to say, I personally, as a student who wants to be able to better teach leadership, I would like to ask both of you what you think are the essential qualities of being a person in the room where it happens. What characteristics, what qualities are important, and what standards should we hold people who are in the room where it happens? I'd love to start with that.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for those very generous words. You're right. I never thought of the number of rooms where I had the opportunity over the last 5 years to interact with world leaders. I mean, as you mentioned it, I'm remembering the day we were with President Obama in Paris. Probably one of the days where I recognized the importance that India has in the world order if we have to make climate justice happen and if we have to make the climate pact successful. So Shilji was part of that negotiating team, led that team, in fact. I think the biggest characteristic, if I may suggest, is trust. Unless you trust yourself and the people with whom you are engaged, you will never be able to achieve success. And it is only trustworthy people who ever make it to those rooms. People whom, for instance, in this case, 125 crore Indians trusting Prime Minister Modi, and he trusting Mr. Prakash Javadekar and I, two colleagues who were with him there, to be a part of the team along with our senior bureaucracy. The trust that the people had in us and our confidence to ensure that that trust is not betrayed, ever betrayed. Of course, in any such room, I would think two other things are extremely important: passion and compassion. Unless you're passionate about what you're doing, success will never be yours. And unless you do your work with compassion, and that compassion could be for your country, for your people, and it certainly should be for all of us, but I think that compassion should also be for the world community at large. That compassion should also be for future generations. That compassion should also reflect in every sphere of decision that you take, because end of the day, I think That is the very purpose of being. So trust, passion, and compassion, I would think, really would be the three characteristics that a leader has to demonstrate to be a part of that role.
It is very difficult after talking Minister Goyal, so impressive points, and also many thanks to your great speech, Mark. I always learn from your speeches, as usual. You are also, we know, one of the leaders in the United States to bring the right policy messages to government, to universities, to companies and others. Thank you very much for the great work you are doing together with your colleagues at the famous Climate Center. Now, from my point of view, I think I agree with all the points that Mr. Minister mentioned. Perhaps I can only give examples from myself. Of course, my leadership is nothing compared to the Minister Goyal's. I am just running an international energy organization, but I can tell you that the passion is definitely very important. And I find myself, therefore, extremely lucky in life that what I want to do and what I have to do is the same thing. This is the job I have. I am completely in love with my job. And I can give you one example. I hope there are not many board members of the International Energy Agency here. I can give you a small gossip. One day, in the board meeting, there was an achievement that my colleagues and myself reached, and all the board members started to thank us and so on. I said, don't thank me. I love my job so much that I am happy to pay you that you keep me in this job, that you pay me. So I really love my job. So I am a very lucky man. My passion and what I have to do is the same thing. It doesn't happen in life all the time. This is one thing. But in terms of the management, so this is several colleagues of mine are here. They know me as a leader of the agency. I am definitely, Mr. Minister, I'm a very, as you know, hardworking man, and I like hardworking people around me. But I have one guiding principle when I take decisions, hiring people, promoting, not promoting, saying them goodbye. This is meritocracy. Meritocracy, merits is very, very important to which country they come from, where they go, what they do, they like me, they dislike me, they do this or that, doesn't matter at all. Merits, do they really deserve it or not? I think this is my guiding principle, and I know that it is the same for Mr. Minister. We had several discussions on that. So this is, there are many leaders here. If I can give one piece of advice, I think meritocracy is a point that we need to think about carefully. Thank you very much.
So I think those answers were so brilliant that I'll make a deal with the audience. If I can hear a sufficient amount of applause, I will burden the panelists with one more, we'll call it an encore question. Good. Okay, it's a deal. So
Excuse me, as long as you don't ask me what's coming in the budget.
Well, shoot, I'm going to have to come up with another question. The president of the University of Pennsylvania, Amy Gutmann, was once asked, so what keeps you up at night about the University of Pennsylvania, right? This phrase, right, about, what keeps you from sleeping? What keeps you up at night? And she said, very, very deftly, she said, oh, nothing keeps me up at night, but there are many things about Penn that get me up in the morning. And what I'd like to ask the two of you is, and I'll give you, actually you can either exercise we'll call it the Gutmann option, if you'd like, but I'd like to ask each of you, what keeps you up at night and gets you up in the morning about the world's energy future? What is your biggest concern, and what is your greatest optimism?
Okay, in terms of energy, what is my biggest concern? So I know, Mark, you would like to hear from me is the climate change, but I will not say that. Sorry for that. I know it's a major issue that it is very, very important for me, for the International Energy Agency. You may think of the energy security, which is very important for us around the world, because the world is becoming more and more a dangerous place. When we look at geopolitical tensions around the world, thanks to several leaders around the world, it's becoming more dangerous place, but it's not energy security. Now, some 20 years ago, in such a ceremony, such an occasion, I gave a speech. At that time, I said, they asked me a very similar question, and I said my answer was to see in the world that one day, very soon, we will have a universal electricity access in the world. At that time, there were about 2 billion people who didn't have access to electricity. These 2 billion people came down, and now, for the first time since several decades, under 1 billion. And thanks to, again, the great work of Mr. Minister and under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. But in Africa today, still 660 million people. In sub-Saharan Africa, 2 out of 3 people have no access to electricity in Africa. And one big advantage India had and still has, strong political leadership. Go and fix it. Minister Goyal gave us an example from Prime Minister Modi and himself. But in Africa, Mark, still 2 out of 3 people have no access to electricity. My dream, what I would like to see, hopefully sometime soon, the universal electricity access, and when we see another satellite picture of Africa, there is a lot of light. This is my dream. Thank you.
Mark, I would like to be more inward-looking. Dr. Barol has to look after the world's problems. I have to look after my country's problems first. If at all I am concerned, and which is an agenda of all of us in government, we are really, really concerned that we are still a highly import-dependent economy, both on the petroleum products, natural gas, crude oil, and coal also in a big way. So to that extent, in fact, even the electrification of railways, the big thrust to renewables, solar, all of them also are linked to India's energy security. The fluctuations of international prices, the vagaries of companies and countries around the world choosing to, I don't know whether I can use the word manipulate the market, but at least certainly leave a lot of uncertainty. And I think that is one of the targets that all of us in government and the people of India are looking up to, is can we rid ourselves of this import dependency and become completely energy secure and ensure that we don't drain our resources in import of energy products. That alone can transform India into a completely another orbit of development, another orbit of progress for the people of India. And that would probably be that final redemption, final goal, which would satisfy, I think, Prime Minister Modi to really feel that, yes, this is a job well done, for which he could tell any of his ministers that, okay, you are now being successful. So that is one thing which is very clearly aspirational target for all of us, and it'll keep me up for a few more years. But I'm confident that given the big thrust we are doing on certain programs, not only the renewable energy or the energy efficiency program, also some transformations on the automobile front, where we hope to lead the world in another sphere of to bring down consumption of petroleum products, and several ways where we believe we can actually become a self-sufficient economy. But what wakes me up in the morning is the enthusiasm of the teeming millions of youth of our country. A very, very excitable young population. More than 60-65% of India is in that age group, which is yearning for more, which has that expectation which drives youth, which is aspiring for a quality of life which India never dreamt of in the past, which has big dreams, big hopes, big aims. It's that youth that drives all of us in our work. It's that youth, the new startups, the unicorns that are coming up by the day, by the week, inventions, innovations, new ideas. That puts pressure on us. That really gives us that encouragement to do more. And to my mind, it's the youth of India who are going to really define India's future and the work that all of us are doing.
Well, as I'm going to bring this event to a close, and thank our distinguished 2018 recipient this year for all that he's done and for all of his gracious leadership, as well as our 2016 for having both been a recipient himself and also nominating the current year's. Doubly influential on our thinking. And I have one more present from all of us to both of you, each of you, which is our favorite frame in that video that you all saw is of the most beautiful space in the University of Pennsylvania. And in that space, hang a set of banners, and your two names are our proudest banners in that space.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.